terms. But anyway, we're going to read this Power of Holes by Daisuke Kachi of the Saitama University, which was back in the ontology meeting in February 2011. And feel free to ask me questions along the way. We're going to try to explain it and see what this is all about. Reification of holes. Reification means to take an idea and make it real. So that's what to reify is, to make an object real. C.B. Martin told that holes seem to have causal powers, showing an example of deadly void. Quote, but now suppose that someone, Alfred, is traveling toward a void, or better still, a void is traveling toward Alfred. He would rightly fear for his very life, and not because of the things around the void, but of the inside of the void itself. It seems that the void has shape and size and motion and terrible causal powers. I mean, that's fair. If like a black hole is coming at you, that is very worrisome. Yeah. You think locally physically existed or existed? Spoiler, they did not. Yes, but tell me how you say numbers physically exist then. You said that they're real. They don't physically exist. That's the whole point of the point with the I have pencils. I have no numbers I can physically show you. Like, yeah. And if you say, well, you can physically make an I like there's a number like right here, like, oh my god, a number. Well, I can show you the picture of Loki just the same. So it's like you're not winning this argument. The pencil is the concept one? Yes, exactly, laughing Jesus. Atoms bunched up in physical form, that's definitely not a number. Like, definitely not a number. Just isn't. Unphys, you fall into a black hole, you become someone born without any senses? No, that would require time travel. How many atoms? Yeah, exactly. Okay, so yeah, so it looks like if we're worried about black holes and stuff, like, yeah, they're dangerous. Trillions of numbers, yeah. Look at the rule and stop at centimeter. 1 + 1 is equal to 2, isn't it? Yep. In view of these sentences, Martin seems to regard a void as something like a gas bomb. At the same time, however, he refused to reify a void. A void is not a thing, but it may be how a space-time region is. Okay, so it's a description of a space-time region, but it's not an object in itself. In spite of this sentence, D. Lewis classified Martin as a non-reductive reifier, as well as Arcasati and Kielvarzi, so abbreviated C&V henceforth, by pointing out that Martin's virtual retracting it by his denial that voids are natural properties of things. In Lewis' view, so we're defining things that you say it's, even though it's a region of space-time, that still makes it a thing. So regions are now things. We're defining it that way. Yeah, okay. In Lewis' view, the universe or space-time is a kind of thing, and the state of a region or how a region is a kind of natural properties. Yeah, so if you think you can define, like, say, the room behind me, that's a space. That's a region of space-time. That's a thing. So you can break up, like, blocks of space. Yeah, so that's exactly it, K-Pars. It would be the space of the discontinuity. And since it has a location in space, the discontinuity has a location and is a thing. Alright, author agrees with Lewis in classifying Martin as a non-reductive reifier of holes, except that for Lewis it was an accusatory judgment, while for me it is rather a welcome, because I am a non-reductive reifier of holes, differing from Lewis as an eliminativist. Yeah, so they're saying you can classify these regions, and that's a legit thing to do. Excuse me. Lewis rejected reifying holes because he disliked spooky things like holes. Yeah, and there's very spooky when you're saying there's nothing there. Like, and we're talking about real nothing, not even a black hole, which is like, super dense mass where light can't escape. But like, if you're saying there's really a nothing there, like we just don't know what's in that, that's even that's spooky. So nothing can't have properties. Yeah, so it would be like a negative property zone or something. And maybe you could call that a property, but like that would be the only thing you could say about it. So does a set of empty sets contain itself? Yeah, exactly. Talking void nothing. Yeah, so you are then a non-reductive reifier is what you are. That's your metaphysics. Probably that may also have been the reason that made Martin refrain from admitting a whole as a thing in spite of granting it that, quote, it has shape and size and motion and terrible causal powers, end quote. Yeah, so it's scary because it's like, even in like space where you say black hole, that still has like physical properties. We understand something about black holes, even if we don't understand everything about them. Like, this is just like a negative space where nothing exists. Yeah, most other theorists also avoid reifying holes and try to explain the apparent causal power of holes applying some causal theories. Factual theory, counterfactual theory, quasi-causation theory, etc. Against them, I will show that non-reductive reified holes are not so spooky and that we should admit them causal powers, though they must surely be limiting cases of powers. Okay, so now we're going to say there's something where there's a region where there's absolutely nothing, but we're going to say that that region of absolutely nothing still has causal powers. Okay. Holes as dependent matterless endurance. Okay, this is like, for people who are into the philosophy of time, an endurant is opposed to a perdurant. Like, I'm sure the author will explain them. But like, they're dependent on things, so they're dependent on like the rest of the space around them defining it. They have no matter and they endure. Okay. I was waiting for that joke, Vipers. At all costs, the only null space or void space we know of is the space between galaxies, but even they contain photons. So yeah, that would still be a physical space. So this would be something, that's why it's spooky at all costs money. It's like, yeah, it's much more than the vacuum, or it's much less, one way or the other. It's not even a vacuum, because the vacuum of space does have a little bit of stuff in it usually. But this is even lesser than that. Okay, using the words the complementary space of X. And this is metaphysics. We're just trying to conceive of a hole here with nothing in it. Does this even make conceptual sense? Yeah, see, space contains space. We're getting weird things. Is the outside of the universe null space? Hard question, we asked. No one knows what's outside the universe. Also, we are relativists nowadays usually about the universe. Like, space-time is relative. And so it's like, there may not be an outside. It may not make even sense in a relative universe. I don't even know what that all means. Like, you're talking about really big things. Are voids coffee cups or donuts? Yeah, so like, that's a related question, K-Pars. I think we're talking like absolute nothings here, but like the void of a donut is sort of like the empty space of that. But it still can be filled with other things, just not donut. Okay. Using the words the complementary space of X as the abbreviation of the complementary space of the space that X occupies. So that's the donut hole. The hole is the donut hole. So the complementary space of X, I define holes as follows. Quote, a hole is a matterless endurant that has the power of fillability, which emerges at an externally connected part of the complementary space of some material bodies thanks to their shape and arrangement. Yeah, so you could fill in the space of a donut hole, but like, that's what it is. It's fillable space. It has to be an outside, otherwise that implies that we are both inside and outside. Yeah. How can you be outside everything? Yeah, so once you start talking about like the universe as a set, then you're talking about like the set of all sets getting outside that. You get yourself into paradox quickly. Very quickly. And it's a mess. So we don't really know what's out there. Author says this is a little modification of the view on holes that C&V, that's Casati and Varzi, proposed in their book Holes and Other Superficialities. My modification is represented by using the awkward expression matterless rather than immaterial. While the word immaterial endurant brings up the images of ghosts and angels, which are made of, as it were, immaterial stuff, I mean by matterless endurant, some endurant that is free of any stuff, including space as stuff. Our difference may be made clear by the following contrast. Yeah, it's a paradox. All right, so the C&V says holes are made of space, and a hole does not rotate. It's like a still wine in a rotating wine glass. Okay. So, but you can see here, holes are made of space. They still have physical properties because they have physical space there. And then the author says holes are made of nothing, like straight up nothing, made of nothing. A hole cannot rotate. It is like the shadow of a rotating pinwheel. Okay. Interesting too. Daniel says power of fillability. Is that understood as having a fillability property? That's what it looks like. So I think that's where the author is going with this. Because like a donut hole, you could fill it in with something else. And then would the donut still be a donut? Well, maybe if you filled it in with like something non-donut, it would be a donut with a hole filled in with non-donut stuff. Now, if you fill in the donut with more donut stuff, then it stops being a donut because the donut needs to have a hole. Okay. The proper parts of a whole do not have any criteria of diachronic identity. A whole keeps its diachronic identity only as a whole. Yeah, it has to stay wholly. Besides, wholes are, as it were, open bodies, since the boundary between a whole and its host does not belong to the whole itself, but just to the host. A whole does not necessarily rotate, even if its host and the boundary between them rotate. Therefore, wholes cannot rotate in the sense that the rotation of a whole is a kind of category mistake and so meaningless. Though it may be doubtful that a shadow is a kind of endurance, we can find similar descriptions of some quantum particles. For example, the rotation of a one-atom molecule is also meaningless. Yes, a Boston cream. That's kind of not a donut, but like, people still use the cream donuts as a donut. Yeah. I want donuts now, damn it. Okay, Parso, what's interesting that you can traverse the other side of a donut one way, but not the perpendicular way. Yeah. I mean, they have properties like that. Okay. Mathematicians talk about, toroids and things. By assimilating wholes to shadows and quantum particles rather than ghosts and angels, we can avoid a dualistic ontology of the material and immaterial. Wholes are not opposing to physical and natural endurance, but they're limiting cases. In other words, we can compare a whole to the empty set. Though it is essential for the empty set to be memberless, it does not follow that it is some opposition to normal memberfold sets. Is just a limiting case of normal sets. Yeah, so they're just saying it's the whole is the nothing, not having empty space. Most people don't talk of wholes in this way. This is really a very sort of limiting case on wholes. This is the whole of all wholes. I just said that. The whole of all wholes is what is being described in this paper. Because normal holes are like donut holes. There is still air in between the parts of the donut. But this hole is there is no air. There is only nothing. And there can't even be anything there. So yeah. Isn't it more than a simple donut, though? I thought it was at least 4-dimensional. We can't imagine that mad shit. Well, what do you mean by, what do you mean, Nasty? I don't understand the question. The hole here is, literal nothing. It's only bounded by where there is stuff. The donut, of course, has, air in between the parts of the donut. Okay, horizontal emergence of holes. One reward of avoiding dualistic ontology is that we can keep the causation related to holes within the causal closure of the physical world. However, it invites another problem. How can a matterless thing have power or disposition and cause anything? Usually, dispositional properties are grounded by some categorical properties of their subject. For example, the solubility of sugar is grounded by its molecular structures. That's why Daisuke and Varzi assign space as the stuff of holes to ground the disposition of fillability, which they attribute to holes. Yeah, so if you want to say there's absolutely nothing there, then how does this thing have properties? Because usually it's something that's constitutive of the the sugar. It's made of molecules, and there's something that's what it's constitutive of, and the property of the molecules is that they dissolve in water, so they're soluble. So it's a constitutive argument. So there's causal arguments and there's causal explanations and constitutive explanations. So if a window breaks, you can say, well, why did it break? You have the causal explanation of the ball got hit into the window and that's what broke it. You can also have a constitutive explanation saying, well, the window is brittle because of the molecules, and that's why it breaks when something happens, is because it's constitutive of brittle things. Nesty says, people say it's donut shaped, which is 3-dimensional, but the shape of the universe, it may have more than 3 dimensionals. Yes, but you can still define a hole in both situations. So if there is a literal space of nothing in the universe, you can make that hole in however many dimensions the universe is. So then you could have a proper hole in the universe. And again, you could, I assume, do the same thing for donuts. You just have to make a n-dimensional donut with a donut hole with a hole in it. It's okay, but then it's a more complex toroid shape, but I'm sure the mathematicians can do these things. Or at least they could talk about it. I don't know what the mathematicians can do. I'm not a mathematician. Okay, so according to the author's definition, the power or disposition of holes emerges thanks to the arrangement and shape of material bodies. Yeah, they're still talking about the boundaries are really what give the hole its powers here. This view originates from Casati and Varzi. Probably the only difference between us may be concerning whether we should admit ungrounded disposition, so-called pure power. So my point, the author's point, would be attributing emergent pure power to holes. Can it be justified? How do we know it's for sure donut shaped? Well, as Viper says, we are dealing with our three-dimensional world, and so that's what we're saying here. Like, I don't have to be sure. I'm just talking about what I experience in reality. Yeah. So in case Par says, yeah, you can also define it this way. This is not a problem. We're not trying to find the truth of donuts. We're only describing our experience at this point and what it would be to be a whole. And like, what are we talking about the properties here? Okay, so how can this be justified? Yeah, N-dimensional donuts. What a great name for a new business, and you could also sell nuclear coffee. Yeah, it's like, what's it? Feels like someplace that Homer Simpson would want to go. Okay, author says it must be admitted that it is a peculiar kind of emergence, since usually emergent properties and its basic properties belong to the same subject and of the vertical relation of macro-micro. In contrast, in the case of holes, the fillability and its basic property have different subjects, the hole and its host. Moreover, they both lie at the same level of scale, so we have to say that this case, as it were, a horizontal emergence. Yeah, so this is what I was saying before. If you talk about glass and why does it break, it's brittle because of the molecules. In this case, you're talking about the hole of the donut, and it's at the same level as the donut. It's not what the donut is made up of. It's not made up of, like, oil and like breads and whatever. So it's different than like other constitutive arguments because it's at the level of the entire object. Okay. Though it is a unique type of emergence, if it really is, it has what could be called reverse causation, which corresponds to the downward causation in the normal vertical emergence. For example, a hole at the bottom of a ship can make it wrecked, and a ventilating opening of a room keeps its walls and floor dry. In these cases, a hole has some effects on its host, which is the parallel to the downward causation, where emergent properties affect basic properties. Yeah, so if you're talking about like, properties of the entire thing and how they relate to the entire thing, like the donut is only a toroid shape because of it has that thing. Why else is it a toroid shape? It's because, as was being said by K-Pars, it's just like this is what it is. It's a simple with a one discontinuity. How many holes does a straw have? Yeah, I mean, according to the mathematicians, a straw is basically a donut. So yeah, but according to other definitions, you can have the hole at the top and a hole at the bottom. And I mean, basically like us, we have a hole up here where my mouth is and where like your poop comes out. It's like one big hole. We're just donuts. Okay. So yeah, we're talking of emergence at a different thing, but that's fine. You can talk about like the properties of an entire object and having sort of like emergent properties of the entire object. Yeah. We're just talking donuts today. Betty numbers? Yeah, I don't know these things, unfortunately. Like, the math is, I never studied it. Okay, regardless of whether we can take the power of holes as emergent, we cannot deny that holes act as causes. Martin's deadly void is a typical example. Jonathan Schaffer also gave another example in electronics. Okay, thank you, K-Pars, for the link. Such electron hole pair generation is routinely understood as causal. The electron absence created by this process is called a hole, and these positively charged holes can cause a catastrophic negative shift in the threshold voltage of the device. Okay, yeah. So if you know electronics, you can think of the electrons as traveling down the wire, or you can think of like the positive holes that the electrons as leaving behind as going in the opposite direction. Because when we started off with electronics, they didn't actually know that electrons were negatively charged, and so they actually started off with positive. There's a little history of electronics I learned in college. And so it's like, then they were like, well, okay. They just had to switch up all their old equations. Instead of the electrons moving forward, the holes are just moving backwards, because they thought the electrons were positively charged before they knew. Papered another navel gazer in yet another hole. Yes, it happens. But I mean, it'll be over shortly. Like, it's just over right here. Like, it'll be over in a second. So at least it's short. As for the ungroundedness of the power of holes, G. Molnar insisted that nobody had proved that there could not be ungrounded powers. He described the power of some subatomic particles as the possible examples of ungrounded power. Of course, there are many differences between the power of subatomic particles and that of holes. According to a traditional distinction, the former is an active power, while the latter may be a passive power or liability. Besides, the former is doubtlessly intrinsic to its subject, while the latter has to be extrinsic trivially, because it follows from my definition of a whole that cannot exist without its host, which means that the power of a whole cannot exist without entities other than its subject. Yes, Vipers, that's what she said. However, the distinction between an active power and a passive one may not be metaphysical, but just conventional. J. McKittrick insisted that the fragility of some material, which is typically a liability, could contribute to the active power of explosiveness when the material was used as a component of a bomb. That's fair. So, like, you know, if you're using like a piece of glass as part of like the trigger, like the glass breaks, releases some chemical, and then the chemical explodes, then yes, the fragility of the glass makes the bomb go. And so it's not a liability, it's an active part of the bomb trigger. Okay. Martin's deadly void is also the case where an ordinary passive fillability changes into an extreme active power. For another example, we could interpret the disposition of water absorbency both as active and passive. Yeah, so like a sponge. Is that an active power of the sponge or the power of the holes of the sponge? McKittrick also gave the example of extrinsic dispositions such as weight, vulnerability, and visibility. Generally speaking, it is my strategy to accept the power of holes by adopting McKittrick's dispositional pluralism. Dispositional terms attribute a wide variety of kinds to properties to objects, intrinsic and extrinsic properties, reducible and irreducible properties, essential and non-essential properties, natural and unnatural properties. You were not expecting supervenience to show up? Me neither, but hey, what do you know? Supervenience is, you know, the property of like something at a higher level something at a lower level has to change if anything at a higher level does. So it's like saying if you have a thought in your head, like there's some overall thought you have, there is some biology that had to change for you to have that thought in your head. So the thought is like this upper level thing that we're talking about, but then there's something in your brain, like the molecules had to, like, you know, the biology had to change. That's what supervenience is, for anyone who doesn't know the term. Omnifist says a whole cannot exist without its host. Just violates one website's terms of service. Yes. Okay, let's finish up this quote. Our disposition ascriptions are neutral with respect to whether the dispositions are reducible or irreducible, bare or grounded, essential or non-essential, inert or efficacious. So yeah, they're just saying we can always assign properties. We don't give a fuck what you're calling them. We're going to assign properties willy-nilly if we want to. Okay. So, author says, surely the fillability is a very unique disposition, and we should say that it is a limiting case of dispositions. It may be instructive here to remind that Hume regarded the solidity or impenetrability of material bodies as a secondary or dispositional quality against Locke, who classified it as a primary or categorical quality. Solidity might be also a limiting case of dispositions, which is at the opposite side of fillability. Yeah, so a little bit of an appeal to authority there, but like if you're going to make something solid, then you should say, well, the opposite thing is a property too. So if it's solid here, then maybe fillability has to be, a property as well. Holes and supervenience. Finally, let's consider the causal over determination related to holes. Basically, the dependence of a whole upon its host is a weak dependence in the sense that it is not specific but generic. It does not require any specific material body, but only some material to exist. So Tutankhamun's nostrils survived his death by being mummified, though I am not sure whether his soul also did. However, we cannot deny that holes supervenes on its host in the same sense that a hole cannot change its shape without changing the shape of its host. Therefore, we cannot avoid the problem of causal overdetermination, with Jae-Gwon Kim most perspicuously pointed out in the context of philosophy of mind. Yeah, there's a lot, so you can the whole point of this is that there's more than one way. Like, I can have a thought and you can have a thought, but there's more than one way that like we can have the same thought, like, because clearly my biology is not your biology. So even though we may be thinking the same thing, like 1 + 1 is 2, the fact that I think 1 + 1 is 2 and it's the same thought, we're just going to have to let that go. We're going to assume it's the same thought. Our biology is clearly different. And so even though there's something going on in each of our brains when we think that, it's not the same biological process. Okay, so yeah, so this supervenes. So we still have the same high level thing, but the biology at the bottom level, something's going on, but it's not the same shit. Latvian Jesus says fuck. The concept of supervenes is ambiguous and its implications on the ontological depends and causation is not clear. Yeah, this is getting real fucking messy. You're perfectly stoned for this. Welcome to like ontology and philosophy and metaphysics. Yes. Yeah, and so this whole thing in ontology and metaphysics is weird. Moreover, it's arguable that Kim's criticism of non-reductive physicalism of mind may have some defects. Keeping away from these big questions, however, I want to cling to the fact that the way of supervenes of a whole upon its host is different from that of mind upon a body. The difference that I showed concerning the horizontal emergence of wholes can be applied to the supervenence of wholes. Can only be applied to the supervenience of wholes. So Kim's argument may not be applicable to the supervenience of wholes. Yeah, so if you're talking about like how does it actually rely on the underlying stuff for wholes is the outside thing that's giving it its shape, not the underlying biology, because there's no whole when you're talking about like thoughts. There is just the brain. Yeah, so rather than matter being primary, the wholes are. Yeah, for this paper here, yeah. Actually, I could give a proof that a whole is a cause of some event, even though it supervenes on its host. Now suppose that someone stumbled over a stone on the ground. In that case, the stone is the cause of her falling. Next, suppose that there was a bump which has the same size and shape with the stone just described, and that someone stumbled over the bump. In this case, the bump is similarly the cause of the falling. Finally, suppose that somebody missed her step upon a hole and fell down. In this case, we would have to say that the hole is the cause of her stumbling. Here it is to be noted that the shape of the bump supervenes on that of the ground. In spite of this, we should say that it is the cause of someone's falling down in the same way that the stone is the cause of another's stumbling. Then we should say that the hole is also the cause of someone's falling down, even if the shape supervenes upon that of the host, that is the ground. I believe that this is a counterexample to the thesis that the supervenience of a whole makes its power redundant. Okay. So, and that is it. I mean, short little paper trying to argue that wholes have like all these powers that we can talk about, even though they seem to be like empty space. Is it saying I thought it would go into the whole, a mitigating argument for drinking and driving? I don't think there's a whole lot of mitigating arguments for drinking and driving, but like, yeah, because you drink it, it goes into the black hole of your body, but you definitely end up being drunk. And that's, yeah. Anyway, what we do here now is everyone in chat, you are welcome to rate the paper. This was a short little paper. It had some fun things to talk about, especially in this area. Like, we're talking metaphysics and ontology, but, we still had examples with donuts. We still had examples of like what it is to fall into a hole. Like if you miss your step because you thought there was something there and there was a hole there, then it's like, this is not like the craziest thing. Okay, so, yeah, as people are rating in chat, if you thought it had some fun ideas and you give it a brain dance, you have to capitalize correctly and spell correctly. I can fix it later, but it's a pain in my ass. So if you thought it was fun, brain dance, you give it some major brain dance, you give it a brain dance. Nog scream for existential or artistic drama. Nog Ouroboros for Nog Oro for Ouroboros, deeper range ideas. Nog knife, slicing and dicing arguments. Nog navel for navel gazing, only for academics. I mean, we are talking ontology here. That's why we're getting so many navel gazings. There is no Nog donut. No, I'd like a donut though. I am thinking I'm gonna go have like something to eat after this. Nog turd. For all style, no substance, no poop underneath, and for Nog grapes for big claims that shrivel up. You may also use the global vote yay and vote nay for just good and bad, and the vote meh for if you thought it was just kind of like a mid paper. And I do calculate a value off of this stuff for better or for worse. So anything in the green at the top will kind of boost the score. Anything in the red will draw it down, and the yay will push it up, the nay will down, and meh actually pulls everything towards the middle. Yeah, there is a Nagoro. Yeah, so there we go. So what do I think about this? I mean, for this area, I think they did a good job, I think I'm going to give them a brain dance. It was a little bit of fun. I mean, this is like, I know this is like, not the most fun area, but I think they did a good job talking about stuff. This sort of like the scary circle, like the scary void. I think that's a nice thing. That was not their example, but I think it was fun. So, and we are talking about like nothings here. So you're going to get a Nagoro out of me also. Was this the best paper in the world? No, we're going to get a vote meh also on this. We're going to vote meh. So I think this was fun. Talking about some ancient things. It's a meh. It's a short paper. It's not that bad though. It's pretty good. As far as this stuff goes. Was this only for academics? Yeah, kind of was. I feel a little bit bad giving a Nog Naval, but like that's true. But like yeah. So this is overall like a nice paper. Would I recommend this to all the people? No. If you are interested in metaphysics, this is cool. But like for a short paper, I think it's pretty good, you know? Are you kidding? Brain dance quality was short, so that's good. Pornography would have made it better. I do not want... I have already been suspended for Twitch for violating the sexual themes problem. So I do not want to do that. There are other websites that you can go to for that. They're also free quite often. So feel free to, go over there. Hey, Bowser, how you doing? Yeah. These nuts. Yeah, explosive. So yeah, feel free. Everyone in chat, you're welcome to go. Give a rating. Yeah. So... it's like, what do I want to say? Do I want to give it anything else? And if you double up on your ratings, like if you spam it, that matters too. So yeah. Thanks for the bit. It's like, does it deserve a knife? Did it slice and dice? It was a little bit analytic. Let's see. I'm going to give it a knife also. Like, this was just analytic philosophy. Not a knife. So there we go. Now I feel better. Okay. Yeah, everyone, if you want to get your rating in, you got 1 more minute to do it. Get your answer in. Get your answer in. 1 minute to go. So yeah. We've had some, I appreciate everyone suggesting these papers. We've had a good run of papers that were not terrible. Quite often, like, some of the philosophy is terrible we've read. And so we've had a good few weeks of reading stuff.
Chair one, chair one, chair one.
Thank you for the 3 bits. Appreciate it, Omnifidus. I do use this as I do demonstrate that I make money by my Twitch royalties. So I appreciate people subscribing and giving bits, although this is not my main tripling up the bits. Yeah. There was a lack of bits. There was a hole of the bits, and Omnifidus filled the hole of the nothing with the bits. So Omnifidus filled the hole, my bit hole with bits, and I appreciate that. So yes, there was a bit hole today, and now we have bits that filled the bit hole. Yeah.